when we were thinking about how to maximize the value here, we didn't build the cheapest building because we weren't going to focus on the value added on how inexpensively we could build a building. We were going to focus on the value added by how special the end result would be. Because we, as a developer, were also the end user. We were thinking 3, 4, 10 steps ahead. So to us, it was not about, for example, a typical developer would have built this site by building a much lower building and building fully to the sight lines, the sidewalk perimeter. It would have been cheaper. You have less facade, you have less vertical transportation, less staircase, so the cost per square foot would have been dramatically lower. What you would have ended up with was a big, massive building with some sort of retail facade, and you know, it would be a squat warehouse-type building. That's what would happen if the person developing it was focused on producing the lowest cost building. And then they decorate it in a way that hopefully they could call it something else. But that's not what we were trying to do when Todd and I were talking about sort of how do we create. So this value was about sort of creating a new paradigm. And in fact, the building itself, the size of the building, which is about 65 feet wide, and from Washington Street, when you look up at it, you'll notice that the south side, there's a sort of a dividing line where the central corridor goes, which is completely visible. But it shows that the south side of the building is smaller than the north side. And that's because what we did on the south side of the building, we just flipped the rooms around. The normal, you know, 34, 36 foot deep shoebox, maybe 12 feet wide if it's a Hilton, 14 feet wide if it's a W, 16 feet wide if it's a Ritz-Carlton. We just threw that out and decided we'd flip the room on its side and instead sort of compress the space, and by offering much less space in the room, but by opening up the vista, create a completely different experience. So if you go into the rooms, in which I hope you will all take the time to do that, the front desk can give you a tour of all the rooms. You'll see that there's a very different experience now. Instead of, say, having a very deep box, you have a shallow box where you're sort of thrust out upon the city. And that feeling then was further, you know, enhanced by the kind of glass that was used, which is a low iron glass called Starfire glass. It has no tint, no blue, green, or gray tint to it. And therefore, instead of seeing yourself in a reflection and sort of feeling like you're in a box, you're sort of shoved out on the city, which is exhilarating. It's a little unnerving at times, but it's fun.
Did you intentionally want it to have that kind of 60s feeling, or you all say UN, and it really has that kind of slab feeling from the 60s?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we talked with Todd a lot about it, and it went through so many iterations, but at the core, the standard as a brand, if you will, and it's for hotels, but as a concept, it's all about, which I think all good hotels are about, comfort. And comfort comes many reasons for it, but one of the aspects is familiarity. So by using a language that seems vaguely familiar, i.e. sort of 60s-ish, I mean, look at the chairs we're sitting in, right? I mean, they look very modern, but they're, you know, 50 years old. You sort of trigger an emotional point that feels familiar and therefore accepting. And it's hitting time and time and time again, hitting those notes that sort of add up to a cumulative experience that we call a good experience. We feel good.
Do you have, I know I was down at the rally with you, and you had a creative director down there. And do you have a creative director here as well, who's kind of continuity expert? Yeah,
we do because we sort of call them an art director, and their job is, you know, in operating a hotel, there are a lot of functional positions. You know, a general manager, a head of housekeeping, a chief engineer, but they're not usually people who are selected because they have a particularly good eye. I mean, it can be, and it's wonderful if they do, but they have many other responsibilities, and it's rare that you get someone with a great sense of, you know, like a good eye. So we sort of, we created a new position many years ago, sort of called an art director, basically someone who works as a partially like a continuity director does on a film production, you know, making sure that if you know, if someone buys new linens, they don't suddenly buy a cheaper linen just because it's cheaper. And if the original intent was to have this kind of curtain, you know, when you replace it, you don't end up with something else. So we do have an art director in each property.
Now, in your mind, is it for each of your properties, Chateau Marmont or the Lido Standard, do you have a different clientele in mind? I mean, how would you describe the, you know, the different person walking into each of those different hotels?
Well, at first,
creative.
I think what's consistent in all of the properties is that we tend to appeal to people who are thinking people and creative people. I mean, we're not the hotel where you know, producers or executives stay, but we're the place where designers and actors and writers and artists.
I tried to get, at the rally, I tried to get a Scrabble board, and the person had never heard of Scrabble.
That's the problem. We'll check with the continuity director. But you know, I think each hotel has a personality, and we try very much to create to bring out a personality. One of the ways, for example, this building seems like it's very regular in the sense that it's a rectangle bent, you know, a slight bend in it. So you would think that basically, you know, you just kind of cut it up like a pizza pie and all the rooms are the same. But it's hardly true. I mean, we probably have a little 16-room types, and it's because I think people like a certain quirkiness. It doesn't matter if one room is bigger or smaller. You can take the same 380 square feet and cut it up 5 different ways, and it will appeal to different people. So we try to use both plastic, you know, tangible things, and also personal means to encourage individuality and to embrace it. On the more soft side, not a physical side, you know, our motto in the company is, you know, never say no. Always say, I'll try. I mean, there's no is not an option.
There's some very knowing details. I mean, when you talked about, you showed some of us the top room, there's some Warren Plattner details, and then in the lobby there's those Edwin Howard.
Yeah.
You know, however you found that, dug up that guy from the 60s to actually remake those things. So they're very knowing, almost insider design touches. And do you think your audience knows or appreciates that?
You know, it's not about being overt about it. I think on some level, if you do layer after layer after layer of that, different moves touch different people. I mean, we had such a great time. You know, Vladimir Kagan, for example, was a wonderful, wonderful designer who had been sort of shunted aside and overlooked for years. And when we did the Standard in downtown Los Angeles, we sort of commissioned him to do a massive sofa. The entire lobby is one continuous sofa designed by Vladimir. And, you know, I don't think anyone had talked about Vladimir for 15 years, but I think these things trigger sort of a collective subconscious on some levels, which achieves what we're looking for, which is a sense of comfort and familiarity, because I think a good hotel always, first and foremost, has to make you feel comfortable. And after you feel comfortable and at ease, you can then sort of transport people to some other place.